Today's episode has been brought to you by OfferingTree, my absolute favorite all-in-one platform for yoga teachers to build websites on, schedule classes from, and share all of their offerings. Anything from courses to memberships. If you're looking for an easier way to get your yoga classes online, head to offeringtree.com/Shannon for a special discount. And today's episode is brought to you by Yoga Teacher Conf. Are you going? If so, I'm going to see you there. It's happening April 22nd to 24th, 2022 in Denver, Colorado. I am going to be there teaching, learning, and connecting with you, podcast listeners, in real life. I can hardly believe it. Every time I say this on the podcast and I think about meeting up with people in real life, I get really excited. To find out more and register, go to yogateacherconf.com. That's yogateacherconf.com. Hello and welcome to the Connected Yoga Teacher podcast. I'm your host, Shannon Crow. I use she, her pronouns, and this podcast is being recorded on Anishinaabeg, Odawa, and Mississauga land. I'm learning more and more about how the indigenous people of Turtle Island lived here and cared for this land well before my ancestors came here. I have a random fact to share with you, Connected Yoga Teacher listeners. I've been doing this, I don't know how many weeks now, and many people are telling me that they are laughing at the stories or finding connection with them. So here goes one from a long time ago. This one involves my brother Conrad. Many of you have heard about him on the podcast before and oftentimes in these random stories. One time, my dad had bought these ponies. There was Black Beauty and Ginger were our two ponies. And Black Beauty was an old black pony, almost as round as she was tall, I would say. That's how I remember her. And she was pretty smart. She knew how to handle children. And she was hard to catch once she was out in the little paddock. So I told my brother, you know what would be really great is if instead of trying to catch her and put the saddle on her outside, how about we put the saddle on her inside? You get on her inside the barn. Oh my gosh. I'm saying this and just thinking it's a really good thing that my brother and I survived the many things that we did as children. So I convinced him to get on the pony. Well, remember how I said that Black Beauty was really wide? The door was basically as wide as her and the saddle. And so as I led my brother through that barn door, he just slowly peeled off and right off the back of her. And he was so mad when I told him, like, get back on, get back on. I think he just stormed off to the house, not impressed that he had listened to me about this whole idea of get on the horse before you leave the barn. So a word to the wise, this is not something you should do. Saddle your horse outside. Don't try and get on in the barn. Watch for barn doors. Okay, where was I? A little bit more about me. I'm a mom of three, a yoga teacher, podcaster, and founder of Pelvic Health Professionals. And this podcast was created for you so that each and every week you are connected to the information and inspiration that will support you as you build your unique yoga business. This week on the podcast, we are exploring a topic that made news headlines last year. The Alabama bill, where Alabama overturned a decades-old ban on teaching yoga in schools. The news sparked a lot of discussion in our Connected Yoga Teacher Facebook group, with many people voicing their support for the new ruling, while others raising concerns around appropriation and whitewashing of yoga. So I asked our resident writer, Ranjani, to write an article on this topic, and we did an interview to discuss some of the key points that she raised in the article because I thought, how cool if you could hear from Crunch a little more of an expanded version of this article. And if you don't know Crunch yet, she is an amazing content creator. She works with purpose-driven health and wellness professionals. She believes that we need more diversity, equity, and inclusion in our communities. So she loves working with business owners who also believe this as well. She helps business owners create valuable content that makes a positive impact in the world so that they have more time and energy to create change in their communities. Connected Yoga Teachers, I feel this each and every week as Crunch helps with podcasts, show notes, articles. I am just amazed over and over with how she writes, how she puts things together. You know, when I said to Crunch, can you do this article? I knew it was a really big thing to ask. I knew that it was not going to be an easy article. There was so many varying opinions and pretty strong opinions. And I feel like she did such a good job with this. When I read the article, I could see different perspectives and really take it in. So Crunch is gifted. I also want to give a shout out to her as well because she recently wrote an article. It was around basic pelvic health. I forget which article it was because she's written many about pelvic health now. I shared it and our website traffic skyrocketed. Crunch actually shared because I was like, look at what just happened to our website traffic over at pelvichealthprofessionals.com. And she actually shared it on her social media as an example of the effectiveness that articles can have. So if you're ever thinking that you need someone to help you write articles, reach out to Crunch. She's also amazing at putting social media posts together and emails. Basically, if it's content and you need help getting it written, reach out to her. She is amazing at what she does. And she specializes in long form content like this article, but she also will help you to repurpose podcasts, videos, audio. That's one thing that Crunch is doing inside of Pelvic Health Professionals. We have really amazing guest speakers and calls, and then she's starting to take that and create articles from that and really put that information out there to help our Connected Yoga Teacher listeners. Crunch was born and raised in Singapore, but now she's a self-declared global citizen who currently resides in Mexico. And you might be able to hear some of the sounds of Mexico in our interview. It really reminded me of my time in Mexico when I could hear the dogs barking, a lot of excitement. Make sure to follow her on Instagram. If you would like to see her travels, her going to new places, eating really cool food, I love watching Crunch's Instagram. And she also shares tips on how to create content and stay focused as a business owner, but also how to relax and have fun. Alrighty, let's dive in and hear from Crunch. Welcome to the Connected Yoga Teacher Podcast, Crunch. It's great to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
I am so excited that we get to talk about this article that you wrote. But before we do that, tell us, what is the work that you do and who do you do it for?
So I'm a content creator for health and wellness professionals. And basically, I focus on long-form content like blog posts, web articles, email newsletters, and I help health and wellness professionals do this so that they can focus on doing the important stuff in their business, like helping their clients.
And so our listeners get a little backstory on what that's like in our Connected Yoga Teacher team. Like, you help to write the kind of script for podcasts. Like, this has made all the difference in having a podcast. I just want to say that, that I can go and look at the script and you've got the intro to our guest and you link to previous episodes and you come up with the wording around the introduction. It really has been like a game changer for the podcast. So thank you so much for that work that you do.
You're welcome.
And then on top of things, then you are now writing articles, which I love, that you have a look in our Facebook group and you see what questions are coming up over and over again, or what ones are getting just a lot of discussion or comments. And this one, this teaching yoga in schools, I posted in the group and it really took off. And I said to you, would you be interested in writing an article about this? And I knew that it was like a big ask. It was a big article. What did it feel like to write this?
Well, it was a very big topic. Like the discussion in the Facebook group was very intense with like a lot of people sharing different viewpoints. But I also felt like it was one of those things that has probably different perspectives that people don't often think about. And it was kind of like a controversial topic. So I felt like I had to do this topic justice by doing a bunch of research about it and trying to showcase all the different viewpoints in a way that kind of furthers the discussion rather than just like trying to put forward any one perspective over the other. So it was a very fun article to write. Actually, I did enjoy writing it. But yeah, it was one of the bigger articles I think that I've written for the Connected Yoga Teacher.
Yeah, it was a little more in depth than like which email software should you choose or which yoga mat should you choose. So let's get into where this article even started. I didn't know this before reading, I guess it was a news story someone had sent to me, or did you send it to me?
No, I didn't send it to you. I think it was someone else.
Right. And so Alabama has a ban on yoga right now. It's still existing, right? That ban is still there.
That's right. This happened after the article was written, but I think they did decide not to allow yoga in schools. So Alabama continues to be, I think, the only state in the US that doesn't allow yoga to be taught in schools.
Yeah. So I didn't know this. Lots of our Connected Yoga Teacher members didn't know this. And do you want to tell our listeners like why that is or why there's a ban on it?
My guess is that Alabama is a very conservative state. And so in my research, there was some information about why it had been banned. And it was because there was a conservative parents group that lobbied for it to be banned back in early 90s. And their idea was that yoga promoted hypnotism and other things that they weren't quite comfortable with. And that's why yoga has been banned in schools in Alabama.
Yeah. And that was since 1993, you wrote in your article. I feel like for me, that was shocking to realize that there's no yoga allowed in any schools in Alabama since 1993. And so there were so many parts to this, though. A huge thread of discussion came up around yoga and religion. I don't know if there are any highlights that you want to talk about that you came across either in the Facebook group or in your research.
There were quite a few things that came up about yoga and religion. And it seemed to be that a lot of people were conflating yoga with religion just because it has historically Hindu roots. Yoga like originated in India 5,000 years ago, and people associate yoga with Hinduism, with Jainism, with Buddhism, or like that's what the modern practice of yoga has become associated with, is these religions. But I'm not sure that yoga is in fact religious. I'm of South Asian descent and my family is Hindu. We go to the temple, we pray to Hindu gods and goddesses. But I personally, in my family, have never done yoga. We do not practice yoga as a part of our religion. And so now recently I started doing yoga, but that's just because I was like, okay, working with yoga teachers, I should figure out what this practice is about, right? And I've started doing yoga separate from religion. I'm not particularly religious, but I wouldn't say yoga is religious. But somehow there's this connection that people in general, I'm not sure if it's just in the yoga community or in the broader public, that people have associated yoga with religion, and particularly the Hindu religion. Yoga asanas also often have names that are related to Hindu gods and goddesses. Like there's one named after Lord Hanuman, and then there's one that's named after Natarajan, which is Lord Shiva. And I think even like a series of poses, like the Surya Namaskar, is a series of poses that is often done at the beginning of a yoga practice, and that's, related to Surya, the sun god. So it seems like yoga is very related to Hinduism, but I wouldn't say that the practice of yoga is the practice of Hinduism, which is what a lot of people seem to think. And, maybe this is a personal question that, differs from person to person, whether your religion or your practice of your own religion allows you to practice yoga, and whether, these belief systems can align in your personal view. But to say that they are linked and that to practice one is to practice the other, I think is a bit of a stretch. So maybe we should think about whether it's actually related or, whether it's just like a misperception, a misconception that they are the same thing.
That is so good. I love this, that we can look at it as an individual. I think there was something else coming up in that thread in the Connected Yoga Teacher group, which was really around understanding why it's related. Like you said, like these poses were named after Hindu gods and goddesses. Knowing that, like understanding the connection that it has, and also understanding how cultural appropriation has worked. We talked to Shalaveja back in a previous episode about cultural appropriation. And really the story that stuck with me in that was, for a long time in the West, Shalaveja felt like she had to keep her culture quiet, that it would be made fun of, that it was weird. And then all of a sudden it was in style and people were charging for it. So I think this is an important topic where we start to look at where is this connected with people's culture and their religion. I don't know if you have anything to add to that as well.
Well, since we're talking about Shannon, who's spoken about cultural appropriation, I think she also mentioned in the thread that we had in the Connected Yoga Teacher Facebook group that the whole idea that Alabama is legislating certain aspects of yoga as okay and certain aspects of it as not okay is what is really problematic about this whole bill, is that, they've just decided that, okay, so yoga comes from India and like it's part of the Indian culture. And now a whole bunch of white lawmakers have decided that these aspects of your culture are not okay. These aspects are okay. And I think she brought up that this is what is problematic. It's not, that they're telling yoga teachers to be mindful about what they're teaching or like to adapt it to their students or to make it accessible and acceptable for them, because that's what yoga teachers do anyways, right? Like if you're teaching to a Christian yoga group, you wouldn't necessarily use the yoga names in their traditional form, or you wouldn't practice chanting or mantras or things like that, because it wouldn't sit well with this particular group. Or if there's a language barrier, you might not use the names. Or, if you're teaching yoga for children, you might not use the names because children don't care about the names. But that's your right as a yoga teacher to decide what is appropriate for the group that you're teaching. And that's fine. But the problem comes in when lawmakers decide that all of this is not okay for anybody in this context where it's, a problem.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Connected Yoga Teachers, I'm popping in here for a moment because I have a question for you. Are you the kind of person who dreads updating your website? Or do you lie awake at night wondering if you sent out the wrong Zoom link? If you are nodding your head right now as you're listening, you are not alone. And that is why I want to tell you about OfferingTree. If you haven't heard of this company yet, make sure to check them out. They're an all-in-one software company with everything you need to run your yoga business. A big thing is that OfferingTree integrates with Zoom and automatically creates those links. So everyone who visits your website sees your offering. It's listed in the correct time zone. So if your yoga student is in Australia and you are in Canada, it's okay. It's going to show up in their time zone. And this really matters. These are headaches that we do not need. We don't need to be converting time zones and copying Zoom links. And so let's just make life easier and use something like OfferingTree when you have yoga offerings and you want to have them online. Don't lose any more sleep over your website or your Zoom links or time zones. Go over to offeringtree.com/Shannon and get 50% off the first 3 months. Okay, let's get back to the show with Crunch. Okay, so speaking of this, one of the things that was put forward in this bill was, okay, you can do yoga, you just can't use Sanskrit. And your article really highlighted to me, and different comments in that thread, of how Sanskrit is not a religion. Do you want to talk about that?
Right. So in the article, I brought up the question of whether language can be religious. And to me, it seems really strange that you can say that a language is religious or not religious, because to me, language is a way to communicate with people. It's not necessarily religious in and of itself. So, for example, if you think about Hebrew and Greek, like these are recognized as biblical languages, but people use them all the time and nobody says they're religious. The Catholic Church uses Latin in its rites in the church, but Latin's fine when you talk about using Latin words in anatomy and botany and science in general, right? But, when it comes to Sanskrit, how have they decided that it's a religious language just because Sanskrit is the language that is used in Hinduism? Is this a situation of having double standards for different languages? Like some languages are okay when they're associated with the religion, but some languages are not okay. And who gets to decide what's okay and what's not? So that was what I brought up in the article, because it seems strange to link a language to a religion.
Yeah, I appreciate that so much. And I appreciate the question, of can we link a religion to a language? The other thing that kept coming up in the thread, and as an argument of why this is happening in Alabama, was the whole separation of church and state. And then I either asked you, or maybe I asked in the thread, or maybe I read other people's questions like, why does this only apply to Alabama then? Isn't it every state that has this separation of church and state? What were your thoughts on that?
I think that in this case, it is a strange distinction that Alabama has, compared to the other states in the US. You're right that all states across the United States of America is supposed to have a separation of religion and state, or church and state. But in other states, it's okay, and in Alabama, it's not. And also, if you think about the fact that in schools in the US, I think that they say the US Pledge of Allegiance, and students are not required to say the Pledge of Allegiance, but they are still taught it. And in this pledge, it includes the phrase "under God." Right? Is this not a way in which that it goes against this principle of separation of religion and state? And, in teaching yoga, is it not the same? That students can still choose to opt out of their yoga classes. They don't have to practice yoga. It's not a requirement. So is this not the same kind of situation? Or is it okay just because it's the Pledge of Allegiance and yoga is different? And the other thing is also that students learn about and they celebrate sometimes religious holidays like Christmas, Hanukkah, and they, practice gift giving and other customs related to these holidays. But these are religious holidays. I know that Christmas is not really anymore a religious holiday, but it does have religious roots. So is this not another instance in which there is no separation of church and state? So which kind of religions are okay and which kind of religions are not? And maybe it's just that dominant religions like Christianity or other Christian denominations are okay when they are mentioned or taught about in schools, and other non-dominant religions are not okay. So the question that came up for me in both my research and, looking at the thread.
Yeah, it's a really good question. And here in Canada, we have the same thing. We're supposed to have it, this separation of religion. And I remember things changing while I was in school, because we would sing the national anthem and then some kids would go stand out in the hall if they were of a different belief system. It was really, looking back, I have a whole different viewpoint on this now, but it's worth looking at. Like, where does that fall? Like you said, I know I've been to concerts with my kids where they pull in Christmas songs, Christmas themes, and then also other, like you said, Hanukkah, or they might talk about other religions. And it's fascinating when we start getting into, okay, well, you can't say Sanskrit. Well, Sanskrit isn't even a religion. And can we bring another culture and learn about it and still know that that's not going to mean that everyone there switches over to like a different belief system because of a yoga class? That's really a great question there. I remember you talking about this when you were writing the article, and you're welcome to you're welcome to ask me to leave this out. Something that really stuck with me as you were doing this research and as you were writing, I feel like you asked this question, like, what's the worst that can happen? Why is it that yoga is not allowed? So, do you think that fear exists, that parents and teachers are afraid, and lawmakers in Alabama are afraid that children will learn this in school? And then, like, what do you think the fear is?
That's a great question. Well, personally, I think that a lot of prohibitions, and when we say we shouldn't do something, or like when it comes to inclusion of other cultures and other traditions, a lot of that stems from fear. Especially in Alabama, I think it's part of what's known as the Bible Belt, and I think like a large majority of people there are Christian. So there is a very strong fear, I think, of religious coercion. And I don't know, I guess they are just afraid that, being exposed to a different culture or belief system would shake their own belief in their own religion. Although I would ask them, if you are so afraid that just like learning about a different culture or a different tradition or a different religion even is enough for you to lose your faith in your own religion, then maybe your faith was not that strong to begin with. And I guess people are more afraid of that when it comes to children, because they feel that children they're easily manipulated or easily swayed or easily persuaded by different ideas. And this is true. Children are open to new ideas because they haven't formed their beliefs in that way yet. But is this necessarily a bad thing for them to be exposed to new ideas or new traditions? I'm not trying to convert anybody to any religion or trying to say that any one religion is better than the other. But I don't know, maybe just it's worth questioning personally, I guess, for each person who finds that this is a fear that they have. What exactly are you afraid of? Like, are you afraid that you will forget your religion or your beliefs just because you practice yoga? Or are you afraid that this is what will happen to children?
Right. Okay. This is such a good question. I'm glad you shared that because it really stuck with me after looking at your article and looking at all of this. Over and over again in that thread, I remember yoga teachers saying, you know what? Alabama's taking steps. Like, this is a step in the right direction if this bill passes and some part of yoga is allowed. So let's just go with this like it's progress. And in your article, you said exploring the idea of progress. I'd love it if you want to talk about that as well.
Yeah, the idea of progress. This is an interesting question to consider, right? So a lot of people in the thread were talking about the fact that Alabama is very conservative. They've banned yoga for so many years that they're even considering, allowing it in schools is a good thing. It's, people are going to get the benefits from practicing asanas, and like, so what if it's not the full form of yoga? Like, that's not really what we teach in yoga anyways. Or they're going to benefit from the breathing techniques, and just having this taste of yoga in schools is a good thing, because then it might pique their interest and they will be able to pursue it further after school or in other contexts if they're so interested. And without this, they wouldn't even know that yoga exists. And it's all a very good thing, right? So in this case, like, yes, all of this is great, but South Asian teachers, in my research and in the thread as well, some South Asian teachers commented saying that this is not really progress. Yes, it's maybe a baby step in the right direction, but is that really what we want? And this whole idea, like we talked about earlier, that this is a form of cultural appropriation, right? That they've just taken some parts of yoga that are good or beneficial and allowed those parts and not the rest of it. But yoga's not just asana. Yoga's not just breathing. Yoga is so much more than that. Like it's the 8 limbs, it's the 5 koshas, it's a lot of other things. And if you're not sharing yoga in all of its forms, like why are you even calling it yoga? In the comments, Pooja Birani also talked about how expressly forbidding the teaching of yoga's culture and history institutionalizes white supremacy and cultural appropriation. And it's kind of teaching children and very young, impressionable students that it's okay for you to take what you want of one person's culture and leave out the rest just because it suits you. And it feels like you're just taking what white people think is appropriate and, discarding the rest with no regard for the people who have lived through all of this, who have, strong associations with this. And these people are speaking out to say that this bill is not great. It is not yoga. Whatever they're teaching in schools or whatever they've legislated to be allowed in schools is not yoga. And all these South Asian voices are speaking out against this being labeled yoga and packaged for a white audience. And to say again and again that this is a step in the right direction feels like it's not a step in the right direction. Like one of the aspects of yoga is ahimsa, not doing harm to others. South Asian yoga teachers are saying that this is harmful to us, that this is, erasure of our culture, of our traditions, and you're just whitewashing a very important part of our history, tradition, and all of that, and just packaging it in a way that's palatable to a white audience. This is harmful to us and it's causing them pain. Should we not consider this pain and this harm over the benefits that white people will get from practicing a simplified version of yoga? This is, I think, like it's important to ask this question, like who does this law benefit and who does it marginalize or who does it harm? And I guess at the end of the day, you also need to ask yourself, given who it's benefiting and who it's harming, are you okay with this and why?
This is so good. This is such an important question for us all to ask ourselves as yoga teachers. Thank you so much for bringing this in, that it's ahimsa, and that as white people, we can't say, oh, no, this isn't harmful, when our South Asian yoga teachers are saying, no, this is harmful. This is cultural appropriation. We actually don't have the place as white teachers to say, no, this is or this isn't. We are not the ones who get to say that, but I continue to see this in multiple threads, not just this one. I don't know if I could see it 2 or 3 years ago as clearly as I see it now. I listened to the Yoga is Dead podcast. I have read different books. I've been really watching and trying to listen. And there's this group that I joined this past week that is a group of yoga teachers. I can't remember the whole name of it. It's the coalition and it's from Charlotte. I felt like I was crashing the party attending. Anyway, they had all these key points as we started the meeting, and we were to choose one that really sat and resonated. And the one that I loved was communicate and listen to understand, not to be understood. And I feel like this is the job right now of us white yoga teachers. Can we communicate and listen to understand instead of trying to be understood of how we feel, as the white yoga teacher? Instead, can we really listen to our South Asian yoga teachers, but also people of South Asian cultures? So I don't think it has to be a yoga teacher. I feel like Crunch, you gave me such a gift. One time there was this thread in our group and it was like, what do you give people at the end of a yoga retreat? And people were listing all kinds of gifts. And a lot of those gifts were Hindu gods or deities. And I remember you asking me and saying, Shannon, what's happening with this? Like, that would be like a Christian yoga teacher finishing the class and then handing out Bibles to everyone. And I didn't see it in the same way. So I really appreciate you sharing your views on this.
Yeah, I guess it's a matter of opening yourself up to different perspectives. And yes, it may feel uncomfortable to be told that what you're doing is not okay, or that it is hurtful or harmful to some people. And I think this is what people are so resistant to, especially when it comes to yoga, when people of South Asian descent speak up and say that, hey, this is not okay for you to be giving out statues of Ganesh or whatever else you're giving out statues of. And like, people are putting these statues of deities and gods and goddesses in their bathrooms, or putting up pictures of Durga or somebody in inappropriate places. And, for somebody of that culture to tell you, hey, this is not okay, and I find it to be disrespectful, maybe you should just listen. Because, for example, if you punch someone in a playful way on the arm and they tell you, hey, that hurts, you're not going to say, no, that doesn't. I didn't mean for it to hurt. I can't help it if it hurts you. What do you want me to do about it? You would just stop punching them in the arm and say sorry, right? So in that same perspective, just like, if somebody tells you this is not okay, or like, I find it inappropriate for you to do this, maybe just sit with that, consider why, maybe even ask them, hey, why do you think that it's inappropriate for me to have a statue of Ganesh in my bathroom? I love Ganesh. Maybe you'd find out something about why it's inappropriate. So it is really, like you said, it's listening to understand, not to be understood. It's not just something that we need to learn in yoga. It's in every single context, right? When anybody speaks up about harm or hurt that they're experiencing, just listen and find out why and what you can do better from that point onwards. And obviously, you're not going to satisfy everybody. And, different people are going to have different viewpoints about what is harmful and what isn't. But it is worth listening to.
Yeah, that's so good. Hey, Allison, how are you?
I'm doing great today. How are you, Shannon?
I'm good. I just wanted to call you really quick because I know that you're bringing social justice to the Yoga Teacher Conf that I'm attending in April, and I wanted you to tell our connected yoga teachers how you're doing that.
Super pumped. We have a whole tract of classes that are designed just for living your yoga, taking it off the mat and into the world. We have Skill in Action coming. This will be their first event in person. They're doing a pre-conference workshop and then also a 3-hour class on Saturday. We also have a class on up-leveling the yoga profession and conscious yoga, social equity in yoga. So skills that you need as a yoga teacher to help you live your yoga with integrity and take it off the mat and into the world.
It's going to be amazing. I'm so glad that this is part of the conference this year. Just to clarify, when you say Skill in Action, like, is Michelle Cassandra Johnson going to be there, or people from her team?
Michelle won't be there, but it's people from her team who have been trained by her, and they've been leading workshops for a while.
That is really exciting.
Yeah, I'm most excited about that.
All right. Well, we'll see you there, April. How do we sign up?
It's April 22nd through the 24th in Denver. Go to yogateacherconf.com. You'll find all the information there.
I also loved the questions that you left at the end of the article, and our listeners will be able to go and read the full article and share it. Some of the questions were, what does it mean to practice yoga? What is your intention in practicing yoga? What is your intention in teaching yoga? How do these intentions shape your perspective on the Alabama bill? These are all really good questions. Is there anything other than like a sigh of relief of, wow, I got this huge article written? How are you feeling now about it?
I'm hoping that this article will be a good starting point for people to think about these questions, maybe have discussions with other yoga teachers, and if possible, bring in some South Asian voices into the discussions. Like, it's easy to talk to other white yoga teachers and like, oh my God, this article is full of all these questions and I don't agree with any of them. And if you just talk to white people, maybe you will find that all of these questions are just irrelevant. But if you did talk to somebody else outside of your little bubble, maybe you will find that there are some important questions in there that you should think about. And maybe you will change your mind, or maybe you won't. And that's up to you. But it is important to have these discussions. And yeah, so I would love for people to engage in discussions. And like, I would love to know what you think about these questions and what your perspectives are. And yeah, please leave comments in the articles. I'm sure there'll be a Facebook thread as well, so you can drop your comments in there.
Yeah, you can leave comments underneath the article, underneath this podcast episode, or in the Facebook group. It would be great to keep this conversation going for sure. How can yoga teachers who are interested in having articles written for them, how can they get in touch with you?
You can check out my website. It's crunchranjani.com. And you can send me a message via the webpage or send me an email. My email's on there as well. So that would probably be the best way to get in touch. Also, I'm on Instagram if you would like to follow my travel stories. I'm almost always on Instagram. So you can contact me on Instagram at CrunchTeeny.
I'll make sure that we put all of those links in our show notes. And if you're on the go and then you want to remember, you can always go over to the connectedyogateacher.com, and Crunch is listed there also as one of our team members. Crunch, I'm so grateful for you each and every week for all that you do and all of the energy that you put in when you send me articles or things to look at or posts. And also your posts on Instagram really get me thinking as well. So I just appreciate you each and every day. Thank you so much for all the work that you do behind the scenes here. And thanks for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been great being a part of the Connected Yoga Teacher team. I love serving the community, and I hope that the articles that I write are helpful to people in the community as well.
Thank you so much, Crunch.
Thank you so much, Shannon. Have a great day.
Connected Yoga Teachers, I want to hear from you. What are your thoughts now after you hear all of this from Crunch? What are your questions? Were you able to kind of see something from a new perspective today? If you'd like to share your thoughts, you can do that over in our Facebook group, the Connected Yoga Teacher Facebook group, or you can leave a comment in the show notes over at theconnectedyogateacher.com/259. I think one of my key takeaways from this episode is that I was really thinking about the way Crunch's brain works in asking questions, and the way her article and this interview made my brain reframe some questions. And I think that's a real gift. I had a lot to think about after this article came out, after we did this interview together, and I'm still thinking on it. I think it's nuanced, and it's really important that we kind of look at a broad range of perspectives and not just our own perspective that we're used to seeing all the time. Thank you again, Crunch, for all of the work that you do for our Connected Yoga Teachers. And again, Connected Yoga Teachers, if you're wanting to reach out to Crunch, we'll make sure to link to her website in the show notes. And like I said, follow her on Instagram for sure. And if you would like to hang out with me, I am excited to say that I will be in Denver, Colorado at the Yoga Teacher Conf, April 22nd to the 24th, 2022. Come and hang out. Also, we have some live calls happening inside of pelvichealthprofessionals.com. Today, if you're listening in real time, it's Valentine's Day. Happy Valentine's Day. We are going to learn about the hypopressive technique with Trista Zinn. And then next month, we're going to be learning from Mary Flaherty all about how to look at research and really analyze different studies that we see about yoga and pelvic health. And then in April, we'll be learning about pediatric pelvic health with Lori Walker-Krause. To check those out, go to pelvichealthprofessionals.com to come and hang out at the Yoga Teacher Conference, go to yogateacherconf.com. And again, all of these links are in our show notes over at connectedyogateacher.com/259. Thank you to our entire team over here, and huge thank you to you for being here all the way until the end of today's episode. It means a lot that you've spent some time to really dig into today's topic with us. And guess what is happening next week? Next week, can you believe this, will be 5 years of the podcast. And honestly, as I'm recording this right now, I'm sitting here thinking, how did this happen? How did we get here? And the way we got here was thanks to you. Thanks to all of our listeners for supporting us, for listening in, for asking questions. Huge thank you to all of our guests and to our sponsors. Oh my goodness, I am overwhelmed thinking of what the last 5 years has been all about as a podcaster. I remember getting to 5 episodes and thinking, how am I going to continue doing this week after week? And here we are, coming up to 5 years. If you have not left a podcast review, that is really the best way to say thank you and happy podiversary if you would like to do so. Over on any show notes page, you can see the button that says leave a review. You can also leave a review on our Facebook page or leave us a voicemail. Oh my goodness, I love to hear your voicemails. I get them directly to my email. You can do that from our homepage, theconnectedyogateacher.com. Alrighty, you know what I'm going to close out with today. I want to know, what will you be doing this week to stay connected to yourself, your yoga practice, and to your community so that you can share the yoga that lights you up?